book dragons, I am back to do my top books of the year. So I do this every single year. Some people do 6-star reads, and I don't really do 6-star reads, to be very, very honest. However, what I do is I do kind of keep, normally when I read books, I get rid of books. So if I don't like it, I'll unhaul it, I'll sell it on Pango, I won't keep it. So all the books to the right of me are books I have loved this year, really, really enjoyed. So I'm going to go through the books that I kept, and I kept them on my bookshelf, hoping they may be in my top 25, however many books I have. But I'm not going to go into too much detail. Just know these were all 4- and 5-star reads for me, and I really, really had a fun time with them. And I want to just shout them out in this video, and then we're going to get into my top books of the year. So, The Duke Heist by Erica Ridley was one of my first historicals I read this year, and I had a really, really fun time with it. I gave this one 5 stars, and I want to go back and continue reading the series. Here is more of a special edition situation. I have all the special editions of The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King and the 6 Scorched Roses. I got them signed by the author, so I decided to put them on my shelf so I could keep them. They all don't match. That is fine, but I did have a fun time with this. This was my foray into fantasy romance. I'm not saying I'm unhappy about it. Also, I read The God and the Guillermo by Sophia Kim, and I gave this book 4 stars. I'm keeping it because honestly, these edges are stunning, but I had a fun time, and this is another cozy fantasy with a mystery element to it as well. And I'm going to talk about this in another video, but I really struggled a little bit with YA fantasy this year and fantasy in general until the very, very end. But Powerless did make my honorable mentions list. I had a fun time with it. I liked the characters, and it was a quick read, so that is why it is on this list. Forging Silver into Stars by Bridget Kimmerer is another fantasy book that I read at the start of the year that I had a really, really fun time with, and I kept it because it's the start of a series. But yeah, this is just an honorable mention that I wanted to shout out. I also this one is the one that could be in my top reads of the year, it honestly could. So I'm going to put that aside for a second. I'm talking about that in one of the sections. And then Mirror of the Beast by Alexandra Bracken is the end of the Silver and the Bone series that I had a really, really fun time with this year. This was not a 5-star series on reading, but I think on reread it could be. So that's why it's in the section, and I keep all of her books. Also, Eris Takes All by Emily Weberly and Austin Sigmund Broca was their foray into YA mystery thriller, and I had a freaking fun time with this book. The end really surprised me, and we're getting a sequel this year, which I'm definitely reading in 2025. I did keep this book. I did keep Iron Flame, even though I gave it only 3 stars, but I want all my books to match. So I am going to do a reread of Fourth Wing and Iron Flame this month, so watch this space. It may change. It was in my worst books of the year, I will tell you that. And then ASAP by Axio is the one that I really did enjoy. It was a fun contemporary, a second chance romance, and I had a fun time with this one. Okay, and then my friend just gave me Fragile Sanctuary for Christmas, and I'm going to talk about another Catherine Cowles, but this is the one with the 3 pages. This is the first book in her romantic suspense series. She got picked up by Source Books Casablanca, and they're re-releasing them. And yeah, my friend got this for me for Christmas, so that is why it is in the stack, because I'm definitely going to keep it. This is another one of the first cozies I read this year, and that is a Fellowship of Bakers and Magic by Jay Perner. And I love this book. It was elves meets The Great British Bake Off, and I had a really, really fun time with it, and I want to read more in this series. And then we have Claws and Contrivances by Regency Dragons 2 by Stephanie Burgess. This book was just a fun listen and a fun read. I really, really do like this cover. I love stuff about dragons. And if you put a dragon on your book, I'm probably going to read it. And then some other books that I really liked. I really like Past, Present, and Future. It was a solid contemporary. It really was a book that I think is perfect for college because it really does show what happens to relationships when you go to college. So yeah. And then the last standout, or the last shadow, is going to be a novel love story by Ashley Post. And I don't think that this made my top books of the year, but I had a really, really fun time reading it. It was one of my first time buddy reading with anyone, with Danny from Danny Dabbles. I had a fun time with that one as well. So yeah, those are all of my honorable mentions. If you want me to go into more depth about them, I happily can, but those were my honorable mentions. I do want to say, before I get into my books, I just want to shout this out. I did wind up rereading Romancing Mr. Bridgerton this year. The book did not hold up. I think it's only going to be a 4-star for me. But I love the TV show. The TV show, season 3 of the TV show is probably going to be my standout show of the season and the year. I loved it so much. I'm in the middle of a Bridgerton rewatch just because I love Colin and Penn so much, and I just wanted to shout that out. So yeah, now let's get into the hard part. Let's get into the books that I read this year that I just want to gush about. Let's get into it. So if you know anything about me, a majority of my reading is split between fantasy and romance, and so I'm going to kind of divide this into two sections. I'm going to divide this into the fantasy books that I really, really like this year that did not make my tippity top, like if I had to pick one per genre, and then I'm going to do the same for kind of fantasy, and then we're going to do the tippy top of the books that I adored this year. Yeah, so we're going to start with the fantasy. And yeah, you know what? Yeah, we'll start with the fantasy. Okay, so let's start with the fantasy and we'll go from there. So, two books on this list I don't have physical copies of. I think I had them, but then I donated them. One was an ARC and one was like I lost the cover of it. So we're going to talk about Gilded Cage. I actually buddy read this with Lotta from Lotta's Book Nook. So I will attach a photo here. This is the second book in the Poison Healer series. I thought this book was so well done. I remember reading Poison Healer and like it was so interesting and so different. And this book blew it out of the water. It was such a different take. Sometimes I find when you read sequels to like a fantasy and contemporary series, like they change so much and sometimes the dynamics of the characters change. I really do want to get around to reading book 3 in the series relatively soon, like probably sooner rather than later. But I had such a fun time with this book. Like, it was such a politically focused story. The setting changed. We had new characters. It was really, really surprising, the end, and that's why I gave it 5 stars, but it was equally, like, I like both of them, so that is why it's on this list. And if I did not attach a photo, here it is. The next book I want to chat about that I don't have a copy of is This Spells Love by Kate Robb. This one was my favorite book that I read in the booktuber battle that I did with Danny from Danny Dabbles, and I love this book. This one was like such a Laura book. Here is a photo. This is basically like 2 timelines. Like this character, something happens to her and she kind of like she's in her modern day life. Something happens, she gets sucked back into a different time where she's living another life, but like it's all based on her kissing her best friend and now she's in this other life. And oh my goodness, I felt so much for these characters, and it was a second chance Friends to More Romance, which is my favorite. And oh my god. Yeah, but I mean, I will say it is more contemporary, but there is some paranormal elements to it, like witchy elements to it. But I just had a fun time with it. I really want to go back and read her other book that came out this year, Primetime Romance, but I love this. I love the characters, and it was just such a sweet story. I have never seen Sliding Doors, but that's like what it was kind of comped as, and I really enjoyed it. I think I forgot who recommended this book to me, but I had such a fun time, and it's definitely a 5-star and one of my favorites of that project by far. Yes, I think that's okay. So then the next book we're going to chat about is A Nightmare Before Christmas by Sarah Rosh. This was one of the Christmas themed novels I read this year, and I had such a fun time with it. Once I picked it up on audio, a lot of my thoughts like changed. This is the Owl Crate edition. I can probably like open it up and take it out of the packaging and such, but I had just a fun time with it. I thought this was a really like fun way to do a holiday romance, and it's an MM romance. You have the Prince of Christmas and the Prince of Halloween, and things are going wrong in the Prince of Christmas's life, and he has a really, really bad day, and he goes and he makes out with a prince at a bar. A guy at a bar. Little does he know that is the Prince of Halloween. They kind of come for a summons because he has to marry his best friend, the Prince of Easter. Things go from there, but there's a lot of conflict, drama, and hotness in this read. I had such a fun time with it. It was a great, a Christmas read. I highly recommend the audiobook for this one, but I had such a fun time. That's why it is on this list. And I definitely want to read the other books by this author, especially her YA stuff. I think I would like that a lot more, but this is definitely a romantasy for sure. That like I really, really liked. And then the next book that I read was, I did not have the best time this year reading YA fantasy, but the books I did really, really hit. So I read Destroy the Day by Bridget Kimmerer. This is the last book in the Defy the Night series. This book is all about like a pandemic, and it's very much following these characters as they deal with that. And I had a fun time with this book. It was very, very hard to read this book. Our characters were not in a good situation. It is definitely a very, very politically focused story with a lot of characters, but I had a really, really fun time with it, and I'm so happy that I picked it up. I want to make sure that I keep up to date on her other work because it's like a spin-off of her other series. But if you're looking for a political focused story, the first book is very, very pandemic heavy, I will say that, but like there's a lot of rebellion in here. It's like a lot of like save the day, and yeah, I really, really enjoyed it, and that is why obviously all these books are on this list. But yeah. And then the next book we are going to chat about is Assistant to the Villain by Anna Nicole Mayer. I really did like this book. It was my first foray into cozy fantasy, like one of the first books I read. And I just had a fun time with it. Like, I just read it. It was fun. It gave me Once Upon a Time vibes. And I read it quickly. I buddy read this with Amy from Amy's Bookish Life, and I had a really, really fun time with it. I loved all the side characters, and it was a quick read. I know people have not been liking it, but it was just a fun read for me. It was it reminds me of when I watched Once Upon a Time. But basically, you follow this character who winds up getting an assistant to the Supreme Overlord, and things kind of go from there. And I had a fun time with it. I gave it 5 stars. And then the next book I'm going to chat about is, I don't know where my dust jacket went, but The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst was another one that I really, really liked. This book was just fun. Like, I just had a fun time reading it. I got to meet her at Comic-Con this year. You basically follow a main character who's kind of running away from a library, and she kind of takes her little cactus plant that's like talks, and they kind of go on this adventure, and they go to this small town where she grew up, and she has to kind of make this spell shop. And there's a little bit of intrigue at the end. I had a fun time with it. I gave it 5 stars. I really am excited for the Enchanted Greenhouse that's coming out, but this one was like not my favorite. I have a top cozy fantasy, but this is like my second favorite cozy fantasy that I really, really enjoyed this year. I love Sarah Beth Durst's writing style, and sometimes cozy is hard for me, but this one had enough of like romance, plot, and characters for it to work, and that's why it is on this list. And then another book I'm going to chat about is The Crimson Hunt Moth by Kristen Cicerelli. I don't think I talked about this at all on my channel because I read it during the boycott, but oh my god, I love this book. I really sometimes don't like hate-to-more romances. They have to be done in a very, very specific way. This book hit. This book was delightful. I loved it. So you follow a main character named Rune, and she basically led to the death of her grandmother. They're witches, and basically they find out you're a witch if you cut yourself, because how you use blood in this society is you use it through blood. She knows that, and she's very, very protective, so she doesn't use her cut blood. She uses her menstrual blood to kind of do spells. And the only person that knows this is her best friend, and her best friend's brother is a witch hunter. And they have to go through this very, very complicated battle this whole book. There is a lot of plot twists in this book that I did not see coming. It is also brother's best friend's brother. There is vibes like that. It is a really, really good book. I really, really liked it. I really want to read Rebel Witch, but I had such a fun time with this book, and that is why it is on this list. I'm going to try not to say that for every single book that I do. Another book that I really, really did like is A Werewolf's Guide to Seducing Vampires by Sarah Hawley. This is the last book in her Glimmer Fall series. This follows Ben and Eleanor, which is a vampire succubus, and Ben is like a plant. He owns his own plant shop. This book was just a fun time, and it was so different from the other books in this series. I think that's why it hit so well. I got to meet her at Comic-Con as well, and I just had a really, really fun time with it. And it was like one of those books that just hit. Like, I loved Ben as a character, and to kind of compare him to the other characters in the Glimmerfall series, he was definitely a favorite for me. So if you're looking for kind of a witchy romance to read in the fall, I would definitely recommend you pick up this one. And then the last book that actually just made this list is Quicksilver by Kelly Hart. I love this book. I am happy that I finally picked it up because it is quite chunky. I just actually literally just got this from Target like yesterday. But this one is a fantasy romance that really did work for me. It has a lot of characters. Basically, you follow a main character named Cerise, and she basically trying to protect her brother and trying to like save herself. She kind of gets sucked into a fairy world, and things kind of go from there. And there is Death himself is protecting her, and there's a lot of drama in this story. I know everyone and their mother has talked about this. I am not the first one. It's not going to only be on my list, but I had a really, really fun time with it. And I sometimes struggle with fantasy romance. This one is also quite chunky. It's like, you know, over 500 pages, and even I read it. So that's a good, you know, thing to just say about that. Yeah. So those are my fantasy books that I really enjoyed. They were the top and tippity top. And now let's get into the romance and the thrillers that I loved this year. I'm going to go through the books that I don't have physical copies of, and then we are going to go through the ones that I do. Broken Harbor by Catherine Cowles is one of my favorite Catherine Cowles that I read this year. There was a lot of stiff competition for the spot. I probably could have put any of her books on here, but I just love the single dad vibes of this story. I love that she was a bakery owner. I love that there was a kid involved. There was hockey, and it was just suspense. I can never predict Catherine Cowles stories, so I had a fun time, and I've really been liking reading her this year. She got a new deal with Sourcebooks Casablanca, and I just love this book. So if you're looking for kind of to dip your toe in to romantic suspense, I would definitely recommend you pick up the Fragile Sanctuary series. It is coming out and they're getting published through Sourcebooks, but I love this book and I'm so excited that I finally got to read it. And then the next book I'm going to chat about is, I'm going to attach both photos, is Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. I will attach a photo here. This was another book that I had such a fun time with. This is another rec from Jess from Peace Loves Books. Basically follows a wedding planner and a florist, and they're kind of forced to team up together on this wedding. They have some history and things kind of go from there. I had a really fun time with this. It was a quick listen. I remember I kept taking my doggie for walks because she was this is when she actually wanted to go for walks before the summer hit, and she went for so many walks that week when I was off when I was listening to this, and it was just a really fun listen. It was a fun romance, very hot, very steamy, but it was also gave me those second chance romance vibes that I'm on the hunt for, so that is why it is on this list. And then the last book I'm going to chat about is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I will touch a photo here. I have not read everything by Emily Henry, but this book was just a fun one. It was a very unique premise. These two characters were kind of forced to live together because their former partners started to date each other and they kind of had to live together for a little bit, and it was just a fun romance. Her books are always bookish in theme, so she was working at a library and there was a lot of library connections to the story, and it just follows a very different type of romance, and I really did like it. I like Emily Henry's writing style. I listened to the audiobook and I had such a fun time with it. So again, I really hope to catch up on her backlist this year and read some more of her books, but this one was definitely a standout for me this year. And then let's get through the books physically. I have Business Casual by B.K. Borison is on this list because she finished her series this year, and oh my goodness, I really do like this series. I think for me, Mixed Signals is still my favorite, but I had a really fun time with this one. This one basically follows Noah and Charlie, and they're at this party, and Charlie sort of propositions Nova to have a one-night stand, and then things get weird, and then they act all awkward around each other, but then something happens, and they're kind of forced to they have to kind of return to their responsibilities and deal with each other because they're kind of staying in town, because Charlie's staying in town to help run Love Light Farms while his sister is on her honeymoon. And I had a fun time with this one. I really do love B.K. Borison's book, so it's not a shock that I really did like this one. And it's definitely maybe my third favorite of the series, but I definitely do. When I read Mixed Signals, that was definitely my favorite, but I'm happy I got around to this one. And then definitely a more emotional book is definitely Unsteady by Peyton Corinne. I got this rec from Tori, from Tori's Novel Life. This one was hard. This one was a hard read. You basically follow Reese and Sadie. Sadie has a lot going on in her life. She's a figure skater. She kind of works at this. She takes time at this rink to kind of become professional. I think her dad is has a lot of issues, and her dad is not taking care of her siblings the way that she should, so she has to step up and do it. And then you have Reese, who, sorry, my camera battery cut off on me, so I had to go delete a bunch of footage. So these two characters, and basically they get off on the wrong foot. They do. The Reese and Sadie get off on the wrong foot, and then she basically Sadie walks in on Reese having a panic attack, and from then they developed a very codependent relationship. I will say that it really became that at the start. but it just became such a solid story about you know, found family and like trust and stuff like that, and it just really heartwarmed me. The sequel's coming out this year because she did get picked up. That's why my cover looks a little bit different, but I had such a fun time with this, and it was such an emotional romance. I read this physically, which I never do, but I had such a fun time with it, and really am excited to see what she's working on next. And then the next book that we are going to chat about is The Mystery Guest by Nita Prose. I actually read 2 books by this author this year. I read her novella though, but this one was like a solid standout as well. Like, I really had a fun time with this one. It's a mystery that I really liked, and I just like Molly's voice. Molly's voice sometimes is a hard time to be in her head because she does have, you know, she is on the autism spectrum, and I love this. I thought it was such a good, interesting. I like interesting being in her head, seeing the case, seeing her family in the story, like how she kind of develops her own family dynamics, and I had a fun time with it. I'm curious to see what the next book is. I think it's called The Maid's Secret. I'll definitely be reading that, but that is why it's on this list, and one of the only mysteries that really made this list. This one is not one I put on my graphic, but I had a really fun time with this one as well. This is The Grandest Game, the new series in the Jennifer Lynn Barnes world, an inheritance game novel. And this is basically a game that Avery sets up. So she's kind of doing her own game as a competition, and you have a couple of different competitors. You have Lyra, Gigi, Ronan, and then you have one of the Hawthorne brothers is also involved in this competition as well. And I had a fun time with this one. I didn't put it on my graphic, but it's definitely like a 5-star rate, and I really can't wait to see what happens next. Yeah, and then another book that was so a standout for me was Abby Jimenez, Just for the Summer, and I love Abby Jimenez. Like, I have read almost all of her books. Almost. I haven't read them all, and I just had a fun time with this one. This one, again, does deal with a lot of harder topics, as Abby Jimenez normally does, but you basically follow these 2 characters, and they basically have the same, like, issue. They both, every single time they date someone, they break up, that person finds their happily ever after, like their perfect person. So they decide to date each other and see if they will have the same effects. They're both dealing with a lot of things. I will say Emma is connected to someone in the Abbyverse. I will say that. And Justin, there was a lot of family drama, but this book was just so good. I was reading this after coming off of like a really hard year, and I remember just devouring this book and really feeling for the characters. So I really am excited for her new release, but this one is definitely a standout. So yeah, those are the books that like are still my favorites, but if I had to pick books per genre that I read this year, these would be the top ones that I have read. So yeah, let's get into it. I will say my top 3 genres that I read this year is definitely YA fantasy, cozy fantasy, mystery, romance, and YA romance. So let's get into it. I honestly cannot choose my favorite YA fantasy book, so I'm gonna shout them both out, but if I had to choose, I'll tell but I had 2, so I had 2 in the spot. One was Firebirds by KJ Armstrong. This is the sequel to Nightbirds that I read, and I have loved this author since she came out. This is such a I am going to burn down the world book, and it is perfect. It's basically about a group of girls that gift their magic with a kiss. At the end of book 1, their land was going through some trials and tribulations, and these 4 magical girls have to team up to save the world. And oh my goodness, if I read this like in the summer and I just was like, I'm going to go burn down the world, I'm gonna go save the world. Kate does such a good job as infusing history in her stories, but also making her stories so likable. There's endless diversity just infused to these stories, and I cannot wait to see what she's working on next. That's why it has made my best books of the year list. This book is severely underrated. Also, the next one I'm going to talk about is also very underrated, but oh my goodness, go out and read this series if you've not. Book 1 is Nightbirds, book 2 is Firebirds, and I think you should go check it out. Another book that I have been screaming from the rooftops about is Isles of the Gods, but the sequel, The Heart of the World, came out by Amy Kaufman, and I devoured this book. I loved it. Oh my goodness, this is probably my favorite duology of all time. It is no shock that this is probably, if I had to pick through all of these, this is probably my favorite book of the entire year. I am a big fantasy girly, but this book just worked. It just had so many elements. It was a very different book from book one. Book one is all seafaring adventures. This is more court politics. Again, endless diversity kind of infused through the whole story, but I just loved it. If I had to pick my favorite cozy fantasy book, it would definitely be At the Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Leong. This basically follows a main character who basically tells small fortunes as she goes on an adventure, but when she accidentally tells what she thinks is a small fortune, but it's not a small fortune, she has to team up with a reformed thief to find her child and a baker and an apprentice to kind of figure out what is happening, and they go on an adventure to kind of save the day. And I love this book. It was just so heartfelt, so warm. It was the perfect fantasy book for me, perfect cozy fantasy with plot, characters, and heart, and oh my goodness, found family galore. I love this book. If you have not picked this book up, this is the real cover in the US, I think you should go do it because I had such a fun time with this. I have two favorite adult romances. One is The Breakup Tour by Emily Webberly and Austin Sigmund Broca. I will attach it here. Yes, this is Taylor Swift coded. I know that. I'm aware, but oh my goodness, I loved it. You followed this girl who was kind of releasing her CD, and she broke up with someone, and everyone assumes that all of these songs on the CD is all about her ex, like, famous boyfriend. It's not. It's about her, like, her hometown sweetheart, and they kind of have to team up and go on a tour together to kind of, you know, make it all work. And oh my goodness, I love this book. It was so good. I know it's Taylor Swift coded, I'm aware, but I had a freaking fun time with this book, and it was so good. 5 stars. I'm also going to shout out Catherine Center for the rom-commers. I will attach a photo here. Catherine Center does something that's really hard to do. She takes like such like a fun book, but also infuses so much heart into it. So you follow this this screenwriter who is really big at a rom-com, and she's like a big rom-com fan, and she kind of gets asked to kind of help script doctor her favorite author's script for like a rom-com, and they have a romance. This book is filled with so much heart, and I just loved it. I don't think it gets nearly enough love and attention. I'm so happy it made like the top 10 in the Goodreads Choice Award, because I probably would not have read it like that quickly, but I love it. I loved all of her books, especially all of her newer stuff that has definitely geared more towards romance, but I had such a fun time with that. Speaking of mystery thrillers with a lot of heart, The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer made my list. I love this book. I went in not really knowing what to expect, but oh my goodness, this book was like everything. Yeah, that's why it's like so high on this list, because it's such an impact. Basically, Lucy has a hard life. She's kind of always been a little bit on the fringes. She is an orphan, I think, and she works as a teacher's aide, and one day she gets a phone call saying one of her students is in a pretty bad spot. Can she watch him for a couple of days because he really needs help? And she winds up fostering him for a couple of days, but then they get taken out of his care because she's clearly not set up to be unadopted. But her lifelong dream is to adopt Christopher. There is a book series she loved as a kid, and there was a competition that she gets invited to participate in where she gets her lifelong dreams, which is basically enough money to kind of adopt Christopher. This book made me cry. This book was just so heartfelt, so sweet. I read her newest book and I wasn't the biggest fan. I liked it, but I didn't love it. But this book, all heart, all found family, all vibes, and I loved it. So this one was perfect for me. I loved it. And then the book that I technically read last year, but I did not get to talk about it in my top reads of the year last year. And my favorite book of this year, my favorite YA romance, is Dungeons and Drama by Christy Boyce. This book was made for Laura. If we had like all of these books you just saw me do are Laura books. This book was a delight. It basically had a D&D friend, a D&D inspired romance, but there's theater. So you basically follow a main character named Riley, and she gets in trouble with her best friend because they're going to see a Taylor Swift concert, which they shouldn't do. So she has to spend the summer working at her dad's gaming shop, but also she has to spend the fall trying to save her drama club show because they don't have a budget, which just really impactful to me because I'm a drama teacher that we often have no budget. And oh my god, this book just made me cry. I read this on like New Year's Eve last year, and oh my goodness, it was delightful. I did read the sequel and I like this one a lot more, but they were both so fun and I just love this book. So yeah, those are my top books of the year. Do we have any similar books? I would love to know. I gave you a lot of information. So yeah, tell me in the comments, what was one of your favorite books of the year? Which one of your favorite books, based on this list, do you think I should read? I think that might be a fun video idea. I'm all about the collaboration this year, so tell me in your comments, what is one book you love this year? Based on these top 10 books, which book do you think I should read? And I will talk to you guys for another video soon.